Hey guys, tonight we're unwrapping something truly wild, what the ancient Babylonians thought was the best dream food. Not best, as in a 5-star rating from Zagat's Ancient World Edition, but best, as in the ideal sustenance or ritual substance that could grant you the most profound, most divine, or simply the most useful dreams. You're probably used to reaching for a warm glass of milk, or maybe a handful of salty popcorn, if you're planning a cinematic evening in your subconscious. But in Babylon, your pantry was a spiritual toolkit, and what you ate or didn't eat before bed could mean the difference between divine revelation and, well, just another night of drooling. Imagine you're trudging home after a long, dusty day on the Mesopotamian plains, the Tigris or Euphrates River glinting in the dying light, your simple mud brick home a welcome sight. You're tired, your eyelids heavy, but sleep isn't just an escape. For the Babylonians, it was a profound journey, a bridge to other realms, a hotline to the god spirits, and even the unsettling underworld. And unlike our modern Netflix and pizza slumber, your dreams back then held genuine, undeniable significance. They were messages, omens, warnings, and prophecies. Sometimes these messages were crystal clear. A dream about a prosperous harvest meant you'd be swimming in grain. Other times, they were as cryptic as a tax return requiring the services of specialized professionals. And here's where the cheeky reality check comes in. If you messed up your dream interpretations, or if your sleep wasn't producing the right kind of divine intel, you probably wouldn't survive the next big decision or even just next Tuesday. Your well-being, the success of your crops, the safety of your family, even the fate of kings and empires all potentially hinged on these nocturnal transmissions. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, why not tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there? I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. We're going way back to the cradle of civilization where writing itself was invented and where the stars were watched with a focus that makes our modern astronomers look like casual stargazers. In ancient Babylon around the 18th century BCE, the very air hummed with spiritual meaning. Every flicker of a candle flame, every stray animal crossing your path, every cough from your neighbor could be an omen, and dreams. They were considered primary sources of divine communication. Not just a random firing of neurons after you've watched too many cat videos, but literal messages sent from the heavens or the netherworld, tailored just for you. This belief wasn't some niche fringe idea. It was absolutely mainstream, underpinning countless daily decisions and major political maneuvers. It's a mainstream historical fact that the Babylonians meticulously documented astronomical phenomena for divinatory purposes. Their approach to dreams was no less serious or systematic, weaving deeply into their spiritual and practical lives. You couldn't just brush off a nightmare as a bad curry from the night before. Oh no. If you dreamt of something particularly vivid, say a field of wheat turning to sand, you'd probably be rushing off to a professional dream interpreter, a Baru priest at dawn. These were highly respected individuals, not unlike ancient therapists, but with a cosmic-grade spiritual degree. They possessed extensive collections of clay tablets filled with dream omens, painstakingly cataloging interpretations of nearly every imaginable scenario. Think of them as carrying the world's first exhaustive dream dictionaries carved into clay and baked hard, weighing a good few pounds. That's our quirky tidbit for tonight, the sheer bureaucratic effort behind decoding unconscious narratives. And this brings us to the tantalizing question, what was the best dream food? Was it a particular fruit, an herb, a specially prepared loaf of bread? The truth is, the answer isn't as simple as eat a banana for vivid dreams. It was less about a single magical ingredient, and more about the interplay of diet ritual purification offerings, and the very intent behind what you consumed. Food in Babylon wasn't merely fuel. It was intertwined with religious ceremonies, social status, and personal spiritual practice. Everything you put into your body had potential ramifications for your soul, and consequently for the quality of the messages you received while you slept. To think of it for us, if you eat a lot of cheese before bed and have strange dreams, you blame the cheese, right? In Babylon, they might consider whether that cheese was part of an offering or if you ate it after interacting with someone unlucky, or perhaps if it wasn't the right kind of cheese to encourage the specific type of dream revelation you were hoping for. Maybe you accidentally invited a minor grumpy deity to whisper nonsense into your sleep cycle, instead of receiving sage wisdom from Marduk, the patron god of Babylon. Historians still argue whether the perceived effect of certain foods on dreams was truly pharmacological, ritualistic, or primarily psychosomatic. Did they believe a specific herb literally induced a prophetic state? Or was it the intention, the purification, the communal act of eating it that mattered more? The subtle nuances of their belief system are what we're diving into over the next 20 sections. This wasn't about quick fixes. It was a deeply ingrained, meticulous approach to connecting the inner self with the cosmic, and every meal was potentially a step on that path. So you're in Babylon, and the dream you just had, that unsettling swirl of imagery before dawn, isn't just a byproduct of that rather suspicious fermented date juice you drank last night. Instead, it's a direct conduit. Imagine living in a world where your deepest subconscious, the very theater of your nightly imaginings, was considered a projection screen for divine messages, an interactive billboard where the gods place their warnings and blessings. It adds a certain weight to bedtime, doesn't it? Like going to sleep with the absolute certainty that tomorrow morning you'll have a new email in your brain direct from the cosmos, requiring immediate attention and precise decryption. No unread marks allowed here. For the ancient Babylonians, dreams were far from random, scattered neural fireworks. They were precisely choreographed dramas, staged by deities, or sometimes by spirits, whether benevolent or mischievous. Think of it like this. If you wanted to know if a king's new campaign would be successful, you wouldn't just look at his strategic plans. You'd probably also want to know if anyone important, especially the king himself, had any pertinent dreams. A dream of clear waters and ripe fields could mean prosperity. A dream of swirling dust and broken pots. Well, let's just say that might necessitate an emergency visit to one of those Baru priests we touched upon earlier, possibly followed by a frantic rescheduling of your day, your week, or even your entire destiny. This profound belief permeated every level of Babylonian society. From the lowliest farmer concerned about his meager harvest to the highest king contemplating war or building monumental ziggurats, dreams held sway. It's no exaggeration to say that interpreting these dream mirrors was a major part of running a stable society. One mainstream historical fact is that numerous cuneiform tablets detail Musharu formal records of dream interpretations, serving as a comprehensive archive that could be consulted for guidance. Imagine a national library, but instead of containing fiction and philosophy, it primarily holds detailed breakdowns of prophetic slumbers and their recommended responses. If you were a dignitary and dreamt of an eagle swooping down and stealing your headdress, someone would look it up in the Musharu to see if it foretold a political downfall or just indicated you needed to upgrade your bird-proofing strategies. They were effectively universal cheat codes to reality. The belief wasn't merely about receiving good omens. Sometimes you needed protection from bad dreams. Our quirky tidbit tonight: the Babylonians also believed that negative or disruptive dreams could be deliberately sent by evil spirits' curses, or even malicious sorcerers trying to sow chaos in your life. It wasn't just passive reception. You might be an active target for bad juju during your REM cycle. If you woke up sweating after a nightmare where your hair turned into snakes, pretty sure I had one of those after watching Indiana Jones as a kid, you might not immediately dismiss it as a random brain glitch. Instead, you might wonder if old man Thubal from down the street, who was annoyed you borrowed his plow and hadn't returned it yet, was actively trying to ruin your spiritual vibe. This wasn't just superstition. It was a perceived magical reality, requiring counterspells offerings and careful rituals, which often included specific food preparations or restrictions. Think about that for a second. You don't just wake up from a dream. You might have woken up from a psychic assault. That adds a whole new dimension to hitting the snooze button. What did your sleep say about your soul, about your actions? The very texture and clarity of your dream weren't accidental. They were direct reflections of your spiritual state, your moral standing, and the balance of powers acting upon you. A dream of being clean and walking in an open field bathed in light was good news, signifying purity and divine favor. A dream of walking through mud struggling or being bound, however, was definitely a contact your Baru priest immediately kind of situation. And guess what played a significant role in attempting to induce the former and prevent the latter? Yes, our friend food. This wasn't merely about influencing what you dreamt about. It was also about influencing the clarity and potency of the dream message itself. They needed clean, undisturbed channels for the gods to whisper their vital secrets. Your body, they believed, was a vessel. And what you poured into that vessel, the purity of the food, the intention behind its consumption, the ritual preceding the meal, could affect its ability to receive and transmit divine signals. It's a holistic perspective where diet, spirit, and sleep were intricately interwoven. Imagine going to bed after a massive platter of highly processed, super sugary snacks, Something ancient Babylon didn't have, thank the heavens, versus a simple meal of lentils and water. You intuitively know which one is going to give you more restful, perhaps even more insightful sleep. They understood this on a spiritual, rather than merely physiological level. And that brings us to an interesting scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether the Babylonian belief in dreams as direct divine messages implied a deterministic fate for individuals. If the gods literally whispered your future in your ear every night, did you truly have free will? Or were you merely playing out a cosmic script? And to what extent could altering your diet or engaging in rituals change that predetermined path? Were the foods consumed meant to truly change fate, or merely provide the best means to understand it? It's a profound philosophical rabbit hole for sure, especially when your king's decision on whether to launch a military campaign rests on the latest cryptic nocturnal vision. If only modern politicians consulted their pizza-induced dreams before policy decisions, we might have slightly funnier headlines if nothing else. You chuckle, but in Babylon that was serious business. Everything had a deeper meaning, especially your slumber. So, you've woken up with that lingering sense of dread from a dream, or perhaps a glimmer of profound insight that you just can't quite piece together. Who do you turn to in a world where dreams aren't just mental flotsam, but divine directives? You certainly don't just ask your neighbor, because while they might have opinions on which crops to plant, interpreting celestial communiques was definitely outside their pay grade. No, for this, you went to the Baru priest. These weren't your average temple clergy. They were the supreme dream decoders, the psychoanalysts of the ancient world. Only instead of delving into your childhood trauma, they were directly tuning into the cosmic broadcast. The Baru class was truly specialized, a pinnacle of scholarly and spiritual endeavor. Becoming one was a serious undertaking requiring years of arduous training and an intimate knowledge of countless cuneiform tablets filled with omens and interpretations. They were masters of a vast body of knowledge known as the Shumu texts, dedicated exclusively to dreams. Think of it as earning multiple PhDs in comparative religion, psychology, astronomy, and advanced semiotics all rolled into one supremely focused spiritual expert. These individuals commanded immense respect and held significant influence, advising everyone from commoners fretting about their oxen to kings agonizing over matters of state. Their job wasn't just about reading the signs, but often about advising the proper rituals offerings, or indeed the necessary dietary adjustments to appease the deities or avert negative outcomes. One mainstream historical fact is the sheer depth of their textual knowledge. The Baru priests weren't just guessing. They operated from massive, systematically organized corpora of omen texts. There were lists upon lists. If you dreamed of your left hand swelling, look up tablet 4 line 7 subsection B. If you dreamt of a bird carrying a snake, turn to tablet 12 lines 10, 15. It was a rigorous, highly disciplined intellectual pursuit, far removed from vague intuition. Imagine going to therapy, but instead of the therapist asking, "How do you feel about that?" they're consulting a physical database of thousands of common nightmares and the divinely ordained countermeasures. It sounds delightfully methodical, doesn't it? Though probably a bit slow to scroll through in a hurry. Now their methods extended far beyond just deciphering what you saw in your sleep. A particularly quirky tidbit about the Baru priests is their practice of dream incubation. This wasn't passive waiting. It was actively soliciting divine communication through dreams. Picture this. You have a weighty question for the gods. Should I marry this person? Will my business venture succeed? What's the capital of Assyria? Kidding, they knew that one. To get an answer, a Baru might instruct you to spend a night or several sleeping within the hallowed confines of a temple, a sacred grove, or a designated dream hut. This wasn't just about catching Z, it was about preparing your entire being for a divine download. And this is where the food element comes roaring back into focus. Before entering such a sacred space for dream incubation, or even before an important ritual, where clear messages were hoped for, you wouldn't just wander in after a greasy plate of fried dough. Oh no. The Baru priests would almost certainly prescribe a period of ritual purification, and this almost always included specific dietary protocols. You might be asked to abstain from certain foods like pork or shellfish, not common in Mesopotamia, but you get the idea, or even from all food for a specific period. You might, on the other hand, be directed to consume specific clean or symbolic foods or special waters, perhaps mixed with certain herbs, all to ready your body and spirit as a pure vessel for the divine whispers. The point wasn't just physical health. It was about spiritual hygiene, making your inner channel sparkling clear like clearing the static from an ancient radio so Marduk could finally get a decent signal through. You wouldn't invite the most important entity in your world into your messy house without tidying up first, would you? So while we're searching for the best dream food, it often wasn't about a singular item, but about the regimen of consumption, what to eat, what to avoid, and the context of the eating. For a Baru, their counsel regarding food was integral to the divinatory process itself. Sometimes this dream food wasn't even for you to eat. It was an offering to the gods, a palatable bribe to entice clearer visions. You'd sacrifice a goat, then carefully prepare specific cuts, perhaps with special grains or fruits, believing that feeding the divine meant the divine would feed you back with insights during your sleep. You really hope they appreciated your culinary efforts, especially after all that effort of wrestling the goat. An interesting open scholarly debate emerges here. Historians still argue whether the Baru priests genuinely believed in their divinatory powers and the divine nature of these dream communications, or whether their interpretations and dietary instructions were primarily a strategic tool for advising the elite and maintaining social order. Were they mystics, counselors, or a blend of both? Did they sincerely believe that an ancient version of kombucha or a specific grain would clear your mental static for divine visions? Or did they recognize the psychological power of ritual and the calming effects of certain natural substances on the body, which simply facilitated a clearer mental state for recollection? The true depths of their personal belief systems are often lost to time, but their profound impact on daily Babylonian life, shaping decisions from domestic squabbles to royal decree, is undeniable. Whatever their underlying conviction, they put food and your stomach squarely at the center of their cosmic council. So your local Baru priest, with his profound knowledge of celestial tea leaves and internal monologues, has just handed down some divine dietary guidance. But before you even consider those hyper-specific dream-inducing elixirs or purified grains, let's step back for a moment and look at the broader culinary canvas of daily Babylonian life. Because before you could think about the best dream food, you had to have a handle on any food, and how that fundamental sustenance formed the very groundwork for your physical and spiritual well-being, which in turn, as they saw it, paved the way for clear dreams. Imagine yourself in the heart of ancient Mesopotamia. Your daily life isn't punctuated by DoorDash deliveries or spontaneous trips to a brightly lit grocery store filled with thousands of options. No, your pantry was probably a modest affair, filled with the essentials dictated by the Fertile Crescent and the bountiful rivers. You were very much an eating what you grow, eating what you can trade kind of person. This general consistent diet wasn't just about survival. It was deeply interwoven with how you carried yourself, how clearly you thought, and how receptive your body and mind were to the ethereal whispers of the divine. You needed a functioning, well-calibrated vessel after all, if you were to host divine communication. Think of it as making sure your home network is working flawlessly before you try to download a massive spiritual upgrade. At the very core of your diet would be grains, primarily barley. And when I say primarily, I mean primarily. Barley bread, barley porridge, barley beer, it was the bedrock of sustenance. This isn't just a quaint historical fact, it's a mainstream historical fact that barley was the most widely cultivated crop, and essentially the currency of daily life in ancient Mesopotamia. You paid workers in barley rations, you offered it to the gods, you probably even cursed under your breath about it after having it for the 5th meal in a row. It was efficient, robust, and nutrient-dense enough to power an empire, even if your digestive system felt a bit regular. Alongside barley, you'd consume wheat, but it was generally considered more luxurious, destined more for festive breads or wealthier tables. Your meals would be supplemented with pulses, lentils, chickpeas, beans, which provided essential protein. Vegetables were also crucial, onions, garlic everywhere, literally every meal, so you always smelled exquisite leeks, various leafy greens, cucumbers, and gourds. Fruits were also enjoyed, especially dates and figs, with pomegranates appearing seasonally. Meat, however, wasn't an everyday affair for most. It was a luxury largely reserved for festivals, offerings, or the tables of the elite. When it was consumed, it was typically lamb, goat, beef, or poultry. Fish from the rivers were a more accessible protein source for many. And of course, dairy products like milk, yogurt, and cheese would have featured. This kind of simple, relatively unprocessed, plant-heavy diet was fundamentally good for the body. You probably weren't dealing with the kind of digestive issues or blood sugar crashes that come from modern hyper-processed foods and endless sugar. A stable, nourished body was understood to be crucial for a stable mind and spirit. It wasn't about avoiding junk food for its own sake. It was about ensuring your inner workings were pure and clear, devoid of what they might have considered spiritual sludge. Think of it like maintaining an ancient plumbing system. You don't want a lot of clogs if you're trying to send divine messages through the pipes. A quirky tidbit is the Babylonian emphasis on the inherent life force, or essence, within foodstuffs. They didn't just see calories and nutrients, they saw vital energies. When you ate a date, you weren't just consuming sugar. You were absorbing the energy of the sun and the fertile earth that brought forth the date palm. This concept of respecting the inherent purity and power of each food item subtly influenced their understanding of how these items contributed to overall spiritual wellness. They really took the idea of "you are what you eat" to an entirely new spiritual level, far beyond what modern dietitians tell us about micronutrients. No wonder your Baru priest wasn't handing out advice based on flavor alone. He was assessing the cosmic vibrations of your dinner plate. You might be wondering if it ever got monotonous. Imagine the conversation, "What's for dinner, dear?" "More barley porridge." "Huzzah." You'd sigh dramatically but quietly so your mother-in-law wouldn't hear. Nevertheless, this fundamental steady diet provided the necessary stability. When it came to dreams, this consistent dietary baseline meant your body was well maintained, not overstimulated or deprived, thus theoretically more attuned to subtle spiritual frequencies. If your stomach was churning from weird foods, your dreams might be chaotic. If your body was balanced, your inner state, and thus your capacity for receiving divine messages, would be clearer. It's a pragmatic wisdom, a precursor to our modern concept of eating clean for mental clarity, just with a much heavier spiritual overlay. Historians still argue whether the Babylonians fully understood the physiological effects of their diets beyond anecdotal experience, or if their dietary practices were purely dictated by religious prescriptions, agricultural necessity, and omen texts. Did they grasp, for example, that certain plant-based foods provide sustained energy without sharp blood sugar spikes, which could lead to more stable sleep patterns? Or was it merely that the Baru priests prescribed simple, unadulterated foods because they were inherently seen as purer and more acceptable to the gods, and clearer dreams were a welcome side effect? Perhaps it was a mixture of both. They saw the beneficial outcomes, then attributed them to divine favor and prescribed practices based on that perceived spiritual purity. So when we delve into what specific items were considered best dream food in subsequent sections, remember this baseline. These special items weren't additions to an already unhealthy diet. They were enhancers or ritual components within a largely stable natural diet aimed at fine-tuning the body for specific spiritual reception. You didn't load up on mystical herbs after a day of gorging on deep-fried something or others. You likely went to bed on a diet primarily of grains and vegetables, perhaps wishing you had just one tiny magical donut for breakfast. No, you can't have one of those either. Best not upset the gods of digestion, or worse, the gods of your slumber. Remember how we just chatted about the foundation of the Babylonian diet? Well, if that diet was a majestic ziggurat, then barley was the very lowest, broadest tier, the massive, unshakable base that held everything else up. You literally couldn't build an empire, let alone a thriving civilization or a personal path to lucid prophetic dreams, without this ubiquitous grain. You ate it morning, noon, and night, likely dreamt about it even when you weren't actively trying to induce divine visions, and perhaps even started feeling like one giant walking stalk of the stuff. Barley wasn't just a food, it was the food. Its cultivation and processing underpinned virtually every aspect of Babylonian life. It wasn't merely consumed, it was wealth. Workers received their wages in barley rations, taxes were paid in barley, and it was used in ritual offerings to the gods, making it an economic bedrock as much as a dietary one. It's a mainstream historical fact that barley served as a de facto currency, making its widespread production absolutely vital for social stability and the daily functioning of Mesopotamia. You bought your new clay pot with barley, your neighbor borrowed a measure of barley for a celebration, and even the king probably approved transactions measured in tons of barley. Forget gold or silver. In Babylon, barley was king. But beyond its economic significance, barley's nutritional profile quietly supported the entire spiritual framework we've been discussing. While it might not sound as exciting as some rare herb from a distant land, the fact that barley provides a slow, steady release of energy throughout the day, without dramatic spikes and crashes, is critically important. Imagine if your internal clock, your energy levels, and your digestive system were consistently humming along smoothly and predictably. That steady rhythm translates into more stable sleep patterns. And more stable sleep, they intuited, whether through divine insight or pure observation, often leads to clearer, more coherent dreams. You aren't tossing and turning from indigestion or waking up starving in the middle of the night. Your body is just calmly operating. This isn't about some fancy dream recipe featuring fermented barley surprise. It's about the unacknowledged hero, the constant companion in your culinary journey, quietly supporting your dream quest from the background. The Babylonians didn't call barley the dream food in the way they might discuss a special ritual paste, but its inherent nutritional steadiness likely allowed their bodies to be in a more optimal state for receiving those important divine messages. You don't try to receive a high-definition divine broadcast on a crackling, faulty connection, right? Barley helped maintain a steady, clean line. If your body was consistently agitated by an erratic or inflammatory diet, it's pretty hard to tune into cosmic whispers. You're probably more likely to tune into your own grumbling stomach. Now for a quirky tidbit, even in religious offerings, barley featured prominently not just as a mundane offering, but often processed into specific forms or combined with other elements. Special barley cakes or various porridge preparations carefully placed before divine statues were meant to appease the gods, implicitly seeking their favor for all aspects of life, including favorable dreams. The god might prefer dates or pomegranates, but they definitely wouldn't turn their nose up at good solid barley. You know, something substantial to help them through their long divine days of smiting and miracle-making. So while it didn't actively induce prophetic visions, the respect shown to barley through ritual offerings could be seen as lubricating the channels of divine communication, including those during sleep. It's like leaving out milk and cookies for Santa. You're not asking Santa to have prophetic dreams, but you are creating a positive energy exchange that you hope will lead to good outcomes, like, say, not getting coal. Think of it: if you're regularly consuming foods that upset your system, disrupt your sleep, or leave you feeling sluggish, your dream state will undoubtedly suffer. It's hard to interpret complex symbolic narratives when your primary subconscious thought is, grumble, grumble, I shouldn't have had that extra bit of whatever was spicy. Barley, being gentle and sustaining, avoids that drama. It ensures your nightly consciousness, even if active, starts from a place of physical composure. Your dreaming self is therefore less likely to be preoccupied with bodily discomforts, and more open to subtle symbolic messages from, let's say, the deity Ishtar, who wanted you to plant fewer thorny bushes around the temple. Just a general example, you understand. And this raises an interesting point for scholarly discussion. Historians still argue whether the consistent physiological benefits derived from such a barley-heavy diet were merely an accidental outcome of agricultural practicality, or if the Babylonians possessed a more nuanced, though perhaps unscientific by our standards, understanding of how sustained nutrition contributed to spiritual and mental clarity. Did they explicitly link steady energy levels from barley to stable sleep and clearer dreams, or was it a beneficial byproduct of a diet dictated by practicality and reverence for essential crops? It's easy for us to apply modern nutritional understanding retrospectively, but pinpointing their exact causal reasoning is a fascinating challenge. You didn't hear a Babylonian scholar proclaiming, eat barley for sustained ATP production and enhanced nocturnal neuronal coherence, but perhaps in their own way, they understood the effect. They just called it keeping your soul in good working order for divine messages. So while not explicitly the best dream food, in terms of directly inducing vivid visions, barley laid the necessary groundwork. It was the background hum of wellness, the steady pulse of a body ready to receive. It prepared the ground for the seeds of insight that more specific ritual foods might then plant. It's like saying the best driving food isn't the energy drink that makes you jumpy, but the balanced meal that allows you to drive safely and with steady focus for hours. Only in Babylon that focus was on connecting with the gods. Now let's leave barley for a moment and journey into the sweeter realms of specific dream-enhancing foods, shall we? You've had enough porridge for one section, I think. From the humble, sustaining grind of barley, let's pivot to something a little sweeter. A taste of luxury that still maintained its role as an everyday staple. Dates. Imagine a food that could fuel you for a day, serve as a dessert, and critically carry profound symbolic meaning linked to auspicious visions in your dreams. That, my friends, is the venerable date palm. You probably grab a date from the health food aisle today, maybe after your CrossFit class. But in Babylon, these plump golden nuggets were practically glittering omens. The date palm wasn't just a tree. It was a pillar of life in the arid Mesopotamian landscape, providing shade timber, and of course, its incredibly sweet and nutritious fruit. For thousands of years, dates were a critical component of the Babylonian diet, a primary source of sugar and calories. They were eaten fresh-dried for preservation, made into syrup, and even fermented into a kind of date wine. This widespread and essential nature of dates is a mainstream historical fact illustrating their vital role in supporting both daily sustenance and long-distance trade. Without dates, life in the dusty plains would have been far less sweet literally and metaphorically. They were everywhere, growing by rivers and canals, producing a seemingly endless supply of natural sweetness. You probably grew up hearing "eat your vegetables," but in ancient Babylon it was more like, make sure you're getting enough dates for your energy and your spiritual foresight. But the significance of dates extended far beyond simple nutrition. They held a special place in the Babylonian consciousness, linked to fertility, prosperity, and the life-giving essence of the land itself. The date palm was considered a tree of life, an incredibly resilient plant that produced abundant fruit even in harsh conditions, making it a powerful symbol of enduring blessings. When you bit into a date, you weren't just consuming fruit. You were engaging with a powerful symbol of vitality. And symbols in Babylon had a way of influencing your nightly narrative. This symbolic potency made dates a common and important offering to the gods. You would present baskets of ripe dates at the temple, either whole or pressed into cakes alongside other offerings. The logic here was simple. What was most valuable and life-sustaining to humans would also be appealing to the divine. And by offering such a symbol of prosperity and abundance, you were essentially making a tangible plea for continued blessings, including clearer communication and more auspicious signs during your sleep. You're giving the gods something delicious and meaningful, hoping they'll repay you with a dream that tells you where to find that missing sandal. Or better yet, a treasure chest. It's a transaction with very high spiritual stakes. Now for a quirky tidbit. Beyond offerings, dates were sometimes incorporated into specific protective or divinatory rituals concerning sleep and dreams. It wasn't uncommon for certain types of dried dates to be placed under a pillow, or crushed into a paste with other herbs, specifically for their believed properties, to induce pleasant or prophetic dreams, or to ward off nightmares. The natural sweetness and preserving qualities of the date might have been seen as representing purity and protection from decay, which extended to protecting the delicate state of the sleeping mind. So instead of a stuffed animal for comfort, you might have opted for a dried date for divine intervention. It probably made for a stickier pillowcase, but if it gave you foresight into the next market surge, it was a small price to pay. And it beat some of the more unsavory options. The association of dates with auspicious dreams wasn't necessarily because of their chemical composition, but primarily due to their strong cultural and religious symbolism. A dream involving lush date palms or bountiful dates would almost universally be interpreted as a sign of forthcoming prosperity, abundance, or good fortune. The purity of the date, its sweet nature, and its life-sustaining properties made it a positive symbol that they believed could, in a circular logic, invite more positive symbolism into the subconscious. You cultivate the good symbols, you invite good symbolic messages. Historians still argue whether the perceived benefits of specific foods like dates on dreams were derived from purely symbolic association and ritual practice, or if the Babylonians had an unstated practical understanding that naturally sweet, energy-rich foods might lead to a more peaceful, uninterrupted sleep, which would in turn facilitate clearer dream recall and interpretation. Was it truly the essence of the date stimulating a prophetic vision? Or was it simply that a body fueled by steady natural sugars was less likely to be roused by a sudden hunger pang, leading to more complete and thus memorable sleep cycles? Did the sugar content allow for prolonged REM sleep, improving dream retention? Perhaps they intuitively noticed these effects, and then wove them into their spiritual beliefs, concluding that dates must be divinely significant. Regardless, the connection between dates and desirable dreams was strong. It's not a stretch to imagine a Baru priest recommending a specific number of dates be consumed before temple sleep, or for a family seeking dream guidance, ensuring that fresh dates were part of their evening meal. You were not only nourishing your body, but subtly nudging your mind towards fruitful, prosperous visions. You weren't just snacking. You were engaging in a delicious form of self-prophecy. It takes eating your fruit to a whole new mystical level, doesn't it? Just imagine if our dietitians gave advice like that today. For optimum brain function and clarity of thought regarding your finances, consume 3 bananas before dawn, and leave an orange on your bedside table as an offering to the god of quarterly earnings. I suspect it might sell a few more fruit bowls. From the sun-baked sweetness of dates, let's dive into the cool, life-giving waters of the Euphrates and Tigris rivers, where another significant source of sustenance and potential dream guidance lured the ancient Babylonians. You might be picturing vast oceans, but these weren't the fissures of the deep blue sea. These were the river folk keenly attuned to the aquatic bounty just beyond their doorsteps. And that bounty wasn't just dinner. It was a connection to the very forces that shaped their world. Fish were an absolutely essential protein source for many Babylonians, especially for those living along the mighty rivers and irrigation canals. While barley provided the carbs, fish filled in crucial nutritional gaps, offering accessible sustenance in a society where large animal meat was a luxury. We know it's a mainstream historical fact that fishing was a pervasive industry, with cuneiform texts mentioning various types of fish fishing techniques, and even regulations concerning fish traps. If you wanted something a bit heartier than lentil stew and you didn't have a whole goat available, the river offered a reliable, if sometimes slimy, alternative. Imagine walking to the local market, and instead of shelves piled high with processed snacks, you'd find wicker baskets overflowing with freshly caught carp, catfish, and other freshwater delicacies, scales still gleaming wetly. Now, why does fish matter in the realm of dreams? Because in a land crisscrossed by rivers, water was synonymous with life, fertility, and profound cosmic power. The two great rivers, Tigris and Euphrates, weren't just geographical features. They were considered living, breathing arteries of the land imbued with divine essence. Many important deities were associated with water. Ea, or Enki, the god of wisdom, magic, and creation, was inextricably linked to the primordial freshwaters, the Abzu. Eating fish, then, wasn't merely satisfying hunger. It was, in a sense, a symbolic ingestion of the very essence of these life-giving forces, potentially bringing one closer to the wisdom and influence of these powerful water deities. You weren't just having a fish fry. You were performing a subtle act of spiritual communion, hoping to tap into that aquatic knowledge network. This deep symbolic connection naturally extended into the realm of dreams. Dreams involving water and aquatic life held significant divinatory weight. To dream of clear flowing water and plump healthy fish often portended abundance, good fortune, and wisdom, a sign that Ea himself might be bestowing his favor. Conversely, dreams of stagnant murky water or dead fish would be deeply unsettling omens, warning of illness, poverty, or spiritual malaise. Therefore, for the Babylonians, consuming fish, especially before a period of intended dream incubation, could have been seen as a way to consciously invite those positive watery energies into their system, nudging their subconscious towards clearer, more auspicious visions. You are what you eat, they believed, right down to the metaphysical vibes. Perhaps they even thought consuming the very creatures of the water could literally carry its secrets. It was a less conventional form of going with the flow than we're used to say the least. A particularly quirky tidbit regarding fish and dreams involves certain types of fish or fish parts being used in specific rituals to ward off negative influences or nightmares. Sometimes a dried fish head or perhaps a special scale might be hung in a room or placed under a bed to deter malevolent spirits that could disrupt sleep and send bad dreams. This wasn't necessarily about eating the fish for good dreams, but about harnessing its symbolic protective power. The enduring and slippery nature of fish constantly eluding capture might have been seen as conferring similar evasive qualities against nocturnal evils. Or perhaps they just figured a grumpy fish-smelling talisman would make even the bravest demon want to steer clear of your sleeping quarters. Whatever the logic, you certainly wouldn't forget your sleep talisman then. Historians still argue whether the dietary choices related to fish were driven by practical accessibility and nutritional needs, with spiritual symbolism layered on top as an interpretive framework, or if the symbolic meanings inherently guided which types of fish were preferred for various ritual contexts or dream-inducing preparations. Was it that river dwellers ate fish because it was available and then assigned it spiritual meaning? Or did the spiritual meaning associated with water deities specifically drive a preference for consuming certain fish when seeking wisdom through dreams? It's a classic chicken and egg situation, only with scales. The intertwining of pragmatic resource management with profound religious belief is characteristic of Babylonian life. So while there isn't a direct cuneiform tablet proclaiming eat a Nile perch before bed for prophetic insights, the widespread consumption of fish, coupled with its profound symbolic links to water and wisdom deities, certainly implies that fish played an underappreciated role in shaping the content and clarity of Babylonian dreams. You'd hope to dream of leaping fish in clear rivers, not stagnant pools filled with unhappy eels. By inviting fish into your stomach, you might have been inviting the blessings of E, ensuring your mind too flowed with wisdom, even when unconscious. And probably less likely to give you indigestion than a massive slab of mutton, making for a clearer path to that coveted wisdom. Now about that leftover fish smell, let's move on before we completely conjure up the aroma of an ancient Mesopotamian fish market in your cozy listening space. From the sustaining and sometimes fishy staples of Babylonian life, let's venture into a fruit that whispers of duality and mystery, the pomegranate. You know, the one with those jewel-like seeds encased in a leathery, slightly unsettling rind. Today you might encounter it in a fancy cocktail or atop a gourmet salad appreciated for its tart burst and vibrant color. But for the ancient Babylonians, this fruit held far deeper significance, entwining fertility and the chthonic realms, and quite possibly offering a bridge to particularly insightful or sometimes foreboding dreams. The pomegranate was an important seasonal fruit in Mesopotamia, prized for its sweetness, tartness, and critically its abundant seeds. Its cultivation is a mainstream historical fact found across the ancient Near East and referenced in numerous ancient texts. It wasn't quite as foundational as barley or dates, but it was certainly celebrated a burst of fresh flavor when available. Imagine cracking one open after a long, hot day, finding hundreds of ruby-red arils glistening inside. A satisfying sensation for any culture. But beyond its culinary delight, the pomegranate carried immense symbolic weight. Its dense cluster of seeds made it a potent symbol of fertility, abundance, and regeneration. For an agricultural society, this was profoundly meaningful. It spoke of the earth's bounty of families growing, of prosperity continuing. If you were hoping for a larger family or a successful harvest, the pomegranate was a visible, tangible symbol of those desires, and consuming it might be seen as drawing that energy into yourself. You were literally internalizing a concentrated burst of life. However, here's where the mystery deepens and things get a little spooky. The pomegranate was also often associated with the underworld and the realm of the dead. Perhaps because of its deep red color like blood, or its hidden seeds contained within a somewhat hard, unyielding exterior, it evoked themes of death, mystery, and hidden knowledge. This dual nature, fertility and life, but also death and the underworld, made the pomegranate a fascinating, slightly ambiguous, but deeply powerful symbol. This concept, our quirky tidbit for the section, is particularly evident in its later adoption into Greek mythology with the story of Persephone and Hades, where consuming pomegranate seeds bound her to the underworld. While this specific myth isn't Babylonian, the underlying symbolic association with the chthonic realms and their hidden knowledge very likely permeated Mesopotamian beliefs about this enigmatic fruit. It's a fruit that makes you wonder if you're eating pure vitality, or if you just signed a small juicy contract with the Grim Reaper. Best not to bite too hard. This duality is precisely what could make the pomegranate interesting in the context of dreams. If dreams were considered communications from both the divine upper world and the sometimes unsettling lower world, then a food symbolically linked to both could potentially be seen as opening channels to different layers of subconscious insight. Consuming a pomegranate might not just induce sweet, fertile dreams. It might open a path to deeper, even challenging truths that were typically hidden. Perhaps a Baru priest would recommend it if a difficult decision loomed, and a full, unfiltered spiritual perspective, however dark, was required. You'd chew those seeds wondering what sort of cryptic underworld intel would arrive in your sleep. Would it be a glimpse of the great ancestors, or merely a reminder of the dusty path you would take? And this is where we encounter another open scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether the consumption of symbolically dualistic foods like the pomegranate was primarily for its intended magical or ritualistic effect on dream content, or if there was an unconscious psychological understanding that grappling with such symbolically complex items prepared the mind for the acceptance of profound, sometimes unsettling dream narratives. Did they believe the fruit literally delivered an underworld message? Or did engaging with its symbolism in a ritualistic context make them more receptive to ambiguous dream material? Were they preparing their subconscious to interpret difficulty, rather than merely predicting it? It's not simply eat fruit, get dreams. It's about aligning your intention with the inherent symbolic power of the fruit. Imagine being told by your Baru priest, eat pomegranates. It will not just show you the path to abundance, but also the obstacles lurking beneath. You'd feel a mixture of excitement and trepidation. It implies that the best dream food isn't always about comfort or easy answers. Sometimes it's about courage and profound revelation. A dream inspired by the pomegranate might not be light and airy, but it could offer crucial insights into the darker aspects of human nature, or the inevitable challenges of fate. It pushes the boundaries of what constitutes a good dream, suggesting sometimes a necessary but difficult truth is what is truly valuable. And so while barley offers stability and dates promise sweet fortune, the pomegranate demands deeper consideration. You finish your snack, a slight stain of dark red on your lips, and hope the insights that come are worth the slight feeling of dread. But then again, a true visionary has to be brave enough for those less than stellar dream landscapes. Don't you think you've delved into the staple grains, enjoyed the sweet promises of dates, and pondered the mysterious depths associated with fish and pomegranates? Now let's tiptoe into a realm that promises a more direct, perhaps even psychedelic route to the subconscious, the whispers of herbs. In ancient Babylon, before you could simply Google herbs for lucid dreams, you'd rely on generations of empirical knowledge observation and ritual practice. These weren't just flavorings. They were often seen as potent botanical conduits, carefully chosen to calm the spirit, clear the mind, or even directly alter consciousness in preparation for sacred slumber. The Babylonians, renowned for their advanced medical knowledge for their time, understood the medicinal properties of a vast array of plants. Their pharmacopoeia, recorded on numerous cuneiform tablets, lists hundreds of different herbs used for everything from treating wounds and fevers to addressing various internal ailments. This is a mainstream historical fact. Their extensive botanical knowledge and the practical application of herbs in both medicine and ritual were sophisticated. You might have received a poultice for a sprained ankle, a special tea for a headache, or a very specific mixture to quiet your troubled mind before bed. And many of these everyday remedies blurred the lines between the physical and the spiritual. When it came to dreams, certain herbs were meticulously chosen for their perceived effects on the body and mind. We're talking about more than just your garden variety parsley. While details about precisely which specific plants were used solely for dream inducement are somewhat scarce, it's tough to get clear translations of what they took before bedtime to hallucinate nicely. The general understanding was that a calm body and an unagitated mind were key for receiving clear divine messages. So any herb known to have a calming sedative or anti-anxiety effect would have been prized. Imagine the difference between going to sleep after a long, stressful day filled with anxieties versus drifting off peacefully. The quality of dreams, the coherence of their narratives would surely differ. One particularly intriguing possibility, and our quirky tidbit for this section, relates to the potential use of psychoactive or mildly hallucinogenic plants, which existed in the ancient Near East, possibly in carefully controlled doses. While we lack direct, unambiguous evidence of them being widely consumed specifically as dream food, in the same way we might recreationally consume cannabis today, their use in shamanistic practices and altered states was known in various ancient cultures. Some scholars speculate whether certain ritual beverages or fumigations might have contained substances to enhance vision or facilitate access to altered states conducive to prophetic dreaming. It's the difference between a lullaby and an experimental soundscape. Both influence sleep, but in vastly different ways. Imagine your Baru priest saying, "And for maximum spiritual clarity, we'll be administering the special brew. Tastes like moss and ambition." Let's hope for only mild disassociation. Herbs were often not eaten in isolation for dream purposes, but combined in complex preparations, sometimes steeped as teas incorporated into special pastes, or even used in incense for fumigation. Think of specific ritual mixtures prepared by the Baru or temple priests, combinations of plants chosen for their cumulative or synergistic effects on the psyche. For instance, while modern research suggests that things like valerian root can aid sleep, the Babylonians might have paired it with a mild stimulant to maintain lucidity during the dream, or with a fragrant herb to symbolically cleanse the mental space. It was truly an early form of precision dosing for the soul. And here we run into another interesting academic conundrum. Historians still argue whether the perceived spiritual effects of these herbs were due to actual pharmacological properties, or primarily psychosomatic effects driven by strong cultural belief and ritual context. Did a certain plant truly induce vivid prophetic dreams, or was the belief in its power combined with the solemn ritual of consumption enough to prime the mind for a powerful subjective experience that was then interpreted as a divine vision? It's hard to say definitively if it was the chemical compound or the deep-seated expectation, or most likely a potent combination of both. When your entire society believes dreams are divine messages, and that specific plants facilitate these messages, you're likely to have such messages after consuming those plants. Your brain wants to deliver on cultural expectations. Beyond the potentially mind-altering, many herbs had purificatory associations. A bitter herb might be consumed not just for its physical properties, but because bitterness symbolized cleansing, expelling negativity from the body, thereby making it a more fitting temple for divine whispers. This subtle form of internal purification was considered just as vital as external bathing before rituals. You want your internal self, your dreaming self, to be pristine, receptive, and untainted by daily life's grubbiness. So the right herb was chosen not just for its taste, but for its spiritual role in literally clearing the internal palate. Ultimately, the ancient Babylonian approach to herbs for dream enhancement was less about finding a simple sleep aid, and more about engaging with botanical intelligence in a holistic, ritualistic way. It was a conscious cultivation of a mental state using nature's pharmacy to facilitate divine contact. Whether it made your mouth taste like a forest floor or an unfortunate accident in a spice rack, you hoped it would bring profound insights. And the thought of drinking some pungent, obscure herbal brew before drifting off, hoping for profound prophecies, rather than just mild indigestion, is pretty uniquely Babylonian. Wouldn't you agree? I certainly wouldn't recommend it before an important morning meeting. From the earthy complexities of medicinal herbs, let's float upwards to something truly golden, something revered across civilizations for its sweetness, its symbolism, and its perceived connection to the divine honey. For the Babylonians, honey wasn't just a sticky treat. It was a rare and precious substance associated with purity healing, and critically with the very nectar of prophecy and pleasant dream visions. If there was a VIP pass to good dreams, honey might have been it. Finding and producing honey in ancient Mesopotamia wasn't a casual stroll to the supermarket's sweetener aisle. Beekeeping was practiced, but it was an arduous and often dangerous endeavor, making honey a luxurious commodity, often more valuable than other sweeteners like date syrup. This mainstream historical fact highlights its elevated status. You probably wouldn't find vast quantities of honey in the average household pantry. It was largely reserved for the wealthy for royalty, and most importantly for divine offerings and specific ritual contexts. It was a golden liquid form of spiritual currency. You wouldn't waste something that valuable on just any old breakfast, especially not if you could use it to gain insight into the cosmos. Why was honey so special in the realm of dreams? Its intrinsic properties, its natural sweetness, its resistance to decay, and its perceived purity as a direct product of the sun and flowers made it uniquely symbolic. Honey was considered the food of the gods, or a divine emanation representing truth, beauty, and wisdom. Think about it. A natural substance miraculously preserved without artificial means a perfect golden color, and produced by diligent bees who were in many ancient cultures also seen as sacred. All of these characteristics converged to give honey immense symbolic power. When offered to deities often alongside fruit grain or fine oil, honey was a potent plea for divine favor. By offering this pure golden sweetness, you were symbolically offering the very best of your world, hoping to elicit the sweetest, clearest, and most truthful communications from the gods in return. If you want the gods to whisper sweet nothings into your ear, or at least sweet truths, what better bribe than a bit of nature's finest candy? You might dab a bit of honey on your tongue before bed, not just as a bedtime snack, but as an almost sacred gesture, inviting sweet thoughts and profound insights into your slumber. Now for a quirky tidbit, beyond being a general offering for divine favor, certain Babylonian rituals explicitly called for honey as a direct facilitator of favorable dreams and protective slumber. It's plausible that a small amount of honey mixed with other elements might have been consumed before temple sleep, or rubbed onto specific areas of the body as an unction believed to purify and open the senses to prophetic visions, especially those of a benevolent and positive nature. It wasn't about stimulating visions but sweetening the pathway to good visions. Think of it as inviting only the friendliest, most cheerful dream sprites to your nightly brain party. Who wouldn't want a dash of that kind of magic? It's far better than conjuring up anything that feels like that bit of mystery meat you regrettably sampled at the market earlier that day. The association of honey with truth and wisdom also played into its dream-enhancing properties. Many ancient cultures believed that eating honey could sweeten one's words or bestow eloquent speech. By extension, this might have translated into the belief that honey could sweeten and clarify divine messages received during dreams, making them more intelligible and less ambiguous. You want your dreams to be a crisp, clear communique, not a mumbled riddle, and honey could be the linguistic lubricant that helps the divine speak plain. Here's where we stumble into a persistent, open scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether the perceived benefits of honey in dream prognostication were purely symbolic and ritualistic, or if the ancient Babylonians also intuitively recognized any minor physiological benefits that a naturally high-sugar food might have on sleep, such as a mild sedative effect, or simply satiating hunger, allowing for more undisturbed rest. While honey is predominantly sugar, it does contain trace elements and enzymes, and some cultures believe a small amount before bed can indeed promote restful sleep. Did they understand that by making your stomach happy and sweet, your mind might follow suit and produce nicer, clearer dreams? Or was it all about the metaphor and the magic? It's likely a beautiful blend of cultural meaning and perceived bodily comfort. You certainly feel a lot more content and potentially peaceful after a tiny dab of golden deliciousness than you do after, say, an unseasoned turnip. So while not consumed as widely or as often as barley honey held a special, almost sacred place as a dream-inducing food for its preciousness, purity, and symbolic connection to truth and the divine. When you consider the value of truly accurate prophecy or reassuring messages from the gods, the expense of honey was a worthwhile investment. It was the elegant solution, the divine sweetener for life's uncertainties. You can almost imagine a grand ruler after consulting their Baru priest about a dire omen demanding, "Bring me honey, and let the prophets of Marduk find solace in its sweetness before they next attempt to commune with my ancestors through dreams." Because nothing clears up a bad spiritual omen quite like a spoonful of liquid gold. Having traversed the sticky, sweet realms of honey, let's bring ourselves back down to something a bit more tangible. Something baked with intention, ritual loaves, and other meticulously prepared grain offerings. We've talked about barley as a daily staple, but when it came to truly harnessing the power of grain for dreams, the Babylonians took things up a notch, transforming humble flour and water into powerful spiritual conduits. This wasn't just about feeding your body. It was about symbolically nourishing the gods, or perhaps yourself, in a way that actively tuned your inner senses for profound nocturnal revelations. In ancient Mesopotamia, bread wasn't just the staff of life. It was the backbone of virtually every ritual and offering. Special loaves baked for specific deities or purposes permeated religious practice. This is a mainstream historical fact. Votive offerings of bread were common, with particular shapes, ingredients, and preparations dictating their purpose and the deity they honored. Imagine bakers not just working for the daily grind, but meticulously shaping dough into intricate forms, understanding that each curve and dimension carried profound spiritual meaning. You wouldn't just throw some dough in an oven and call it a day. This was culinary art in the service of cosmic connection. When it came to enhancing dream states or seeking specific insights through slumber, these specialized breads often played a critical role. They might not always have been for human consumption. Sometimes the dream food was an offering itself, laid out in a temple or before a shrine as a meal for the gods, intended to make them favorably inclined to send clear dream messages. Think of it as leaving out a meticulously crafted gourmet dinner for your cosmic pen pal, hoping they'll reply with detailed instructions rather than just a cryptic emoji. You hoped the specific offerings would encourage a specific kind of dream. Perhaps a crescent-shaped loaf would invite lunar visions, while a sundisk loaf would welcome radiant, clear revelations. Now, for a particularly quirky tidbit, certain specific forms of ritualistic bread were consumed by the petitioner themselves during preparatory purification rituals before dream incubation in a temple. These could be small symbolic mouthfuls or larger loaves intended to form a primary part of the pre-sleep meal. The intention was to purify the body, prepare the spirit, and enhance the recipient's ability to receive divine visions. It might have been bread mixed with particular herbs from our previous section, or consecrated waters designed not just for physical nourishment, but for direct spiritual benefit. Imagine biting into a piece of bread and thinking, "Okay, brain, it's time to prepare for some profound subconscious downloading. No weird stuff tonight, please, just pure, unadulterated divine truth." It adds a whole new level of pressure to your bedtime snack, doesn't it? These were not random concoctions. The Baru priests, those masterful dream interpreters, would likely prescribe these specific breads. The type of grain used, whether it was unleavened or leavened, and any additional ingredients like special salts, honey, or ground herbs would all be carefully chosen for their symbolic and energetic properties. It was culinary alchemy. If you wanted dreams about agricultural prosperity, you might receive a bread heavy on first harvest barley. If you sought revelations about fate and wisdom, perhaps a more complex, richly kneaded wheat loaf might be prescribed. An interesting open scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether the perceived effect of these ritual breads on dream experiences was purely symbolic, meaning that consuming an object laden with cultural and religious meaning would psychologically prime the dreamer for significant dreams, or if certain unstated nutritional benefits from a wholesome, ritually prepared meal could have genuinely contributed to more restful and coherent sleep, thus enabling better dream recall. Did the symbolic purity of the bread clear the static, or did the simple, nourishing food lead to less digestive distress and therefore better quality sleep overall? Perhaps it was a potent combination of both, a mental priming enabled by physical well-being. It's hard to unravel where their precise belief system lay. You simply know that a meal of ritualistic bread, probably accompanied by some potent intention, was likely to produce far more coherent dreams than one involving a particularly large platter of suspiciously spiced stew. The act of breaking and eating consecrated bread created a sacred bond. You were internalizing the purity and intent of the offering, bridging the gap between the mundane act of eating and the profound desire for divine connection through dreams. These loaves weren't just for hunger. They were physical prayers, digestible wishes, and the cornerstone of ritual preparations that sought to make your nocturnal journey into the spiritual world a clear, productive one. So next time you're about to have a piece of toast, maybe pause and reflect on its hidden powers. Who knows what subtle energies you might unlock or what secrets your inner subconscious might then decide to share. Though hopefully nothing as profound as the fate of an empire before your morning coffee. Some messages can probably wait until after the caffeine has kicked in. Just a thought. You've sampled the serious spiritual staples and the ritualistic breads. Now let's uncork something a bit more intoxicating, something that flows through the very veins of ancient Mesopotamian life and rituals: beer. When you think of dream food, you probably don't immediately jump to alcoholic beverages, right? You probably associate beer with blurry nights and fuzzy mornings. But for the Babylonians, beer was not just a drink. It was nourishment medicine and a fundamental component of religious rituals, even those designed to prepare you for prophetic dreams. It held a truly pervasive, often sacred role. Beer in ancient Mesopotamia was so incredibly widespread and central to daily life that its prevalence is a major mainstream historical fact. Forget water. Many historians believe people primarily drank beer, or at least a weaker version of it much of the time. The brewing process, often from barley, our old friend, killed pathogens, making it safer than unfiltered water, and it provided calories and nutrients. Imagine every member of society, from kings to commoners, adults, and even children, likely consuming weaker, less intoxicating versions, relied on beer as a dietary staple. It wasn't just a drink for Friday night unwinding. It was breakfast, lunch, and dinner, potentially aiding digestion and settling the stomach. And a settled stomach, as we've discussed, was crucial for clarity in the realm of dreams. So how does a seemingly prosaic, or to our modern minds a bit indulgent, beverage like beer become a best dream food? The connection lies not just in its caloric value or relative safety, but in its ability to subtly alter consciousness. While overt drunkenness might induce chaotic sleep, controlled consumption of fermented beverages was known to have a relaxing, calming effect. For the Babylonians, this wasn't just about relaxation. It was about opening up new avenues of perception, softening the boundaries between the conscious and subconscious mind. A slight loosening of mental inhibitions could, they believed, make the dreamer more receptive to spiritual communication, whether from benevolent deities or from more enigmatic entities. You're gently rocking the boat, hoping it floats closer to the shores of divine insight, not capsizing into a sea of oblivion. A quirky tidbit in this regard relates to the use of beer in various ritual contexts for intoxication for insight. While Babylonians distinguished between proper moderate consumption and debauched drunkenness, a deliberate ritualized consumption of beer, or stronger alcoholic beverages like date wine, which could be fermented to impressive potency, was sometimes undertaken by priests or petitioners to induce altered states conducive to prophecy or divination. The subtle haziness induced by a specific brew could be seen as blurring the lines of perception, allowing spiritual truths to seep through the veil of normal consciousness. Imagine your Baru priest saying, "Have this specially consecrated beer. Just one chalice, mind you, for enlightenment, not for losing your sand-walking sandals." It adds a certain mystical element to happy hour, doesn't it? It's crucial to understand that this wasn't about getting plastered to escape reality. It was about achieving a liminal state, a threshold between waking and dreaming, a state that was neither fully alert nor deeply unconscious. This particular state, achieved through controlled consumption of beer, might have been seen as particularly fertile ground for prophetic or significant dreams, because the rational filtering mind was gently quieted. You might recall this sensation yourself after a glass of wine with dinner. Not drunk, but just a little more relaxed, a little more introspective. That's the space where creative, often powerful dreams tend to flourish. An enduring, open scholarly debate revolves around the precise methods and intentions behind this ritual consumption of alcoholic beverages. Historians still argue whether the perceived benefits were primarily the mild sedative effects that promoted undisturbed and thus more coherent sleep, or if the Babylonians sought a deeper psychoactive alteration of consciousness to directly engage with deities through visions which might be misremembered or described as dreams upon waking. Was the alcohol a literal truth serum for the soul, Or just a sophisticated sleep aid that created conditions for clearer memory of dreams? And how did they manage the fine line between helpful altered state and unproductive stupor? These fine distinctions highlight the complex understanding they had of mind-altering substances. Ultimately, while not a dream food, in the sense of actively giving you the content of your dream, beer consumed within specific parameters and intentions might have been considered a crucial preparative substance. It could help you shed the day's anxieties, calm your restless mind, and slip into that liminal state where divine whispers were more easily heard and coherent dreams more vividly formed. So next time you hoist a frosty glass of barley's fermented finest, perhaps pause for a moment and consider the profound historical legacy it carries, not just as a beverage for good cheer, but as an ancient tool for exploring the very depths of the dreaming soul. Just remember too much, and those profound visions just turn into profound headaches, which, as your Baru priest would likely warn, is almost certainly an omen of poor choices. Having explored the perhaps surprising role of beer in achieving a relaxed state for dreams, let's turn our attention to something a bit smoother. Something that soothes and cleanses oil. When we talk about oil in Babylon, we're almost exclusively talking about sesame oil, though olive oil imported from elsewhere would have been a luxury. But primarily, sesame oil wasn't just a cooking ingredient or a lamp fuel. It was deeply interwoven with purification rituals, anointing, and spiritual readiness, making it a subtle but potent component in preparing the body for clearer dream reception. Sesame was one of the earliest domesticated oilseed crops thriving in the Mesopotamian climate. The process of extracting oil was labor-intensive, yet it produced a versatile, rich oil that was highly prized. This makes the widespread use of sesame oil a mainstream historical fact found in various culinary, cosmetic, and medicinal applications throughout Babylonian society. It was essential for everyday cooking, often added to porridges, breads, and stews for flavor and nutrition. Think of it as their equivalent of a multi-purpose cooking spray, a nutritional supplement all in one fragrant bottle. But its significance in dreams wasn't merely dietary. In ancient Mesopotamian culture, oil held immense symbolic meaning related to purification, blessing, and consecration. Anointing the body with oil was a common practice, both for daily hygiene and in a profound spiritual context. Priests and petitioners would ritually rub their skin with oil, believing it cleansed not only the body, but also the spirit, making it receptive to divine influence and pure thoughts. It literally marked one as set apart for sacred purposes. This ritualistic application is key. How does this connect to dreams? If your body is considered a vessel for divine communication, then purifying and blessing that vessel is paramount. Anointing with oil before sleeping, especially before an important dream incubation period in a temple or during a significant ritual, was seen as washing away impurities, soothing anxieties, and creating a pure, untainted channel for spiritual messages. Imagine lying down perhaps with a soft, clean linen tunic after a soothing anointing with fragrant sesame oil. The sensation itself, beyond the symbolic meaning, promotes relaxation and calm. A calm body and a purified spirit are certainly more likely to yield coherent, memorable dreams than a body agitated and restless from spiritual impurities. A particularly quirky tidbit regarding oil and dreams is its use in scrying or oil omens lacanomancy, where patterns formed by oil on water were interpreted for divination. While this is not directly related to consuming oil for dreams, it speaks to the broader Babylonian understanding of oil as a medium for uncovering hidden truths and foresight. By ingesting or anointing with oil, they might have hoped to internalize that truth-revealing quality, effectively turning their own internal world into a more receptive canvas for divine insight, much like the scrying bowl. You're trying to make your brain as clear and reflective as that oily surface. Perhaps it also ensured that any spiritual messages could slide right into your mind without any friction. The Baru priests would very likely incorporate oil into their dream-related practices. This might involve anointing a petitioner's forehead and eyelids with specific oils before slumber, emphasizing the symbolic act of opening the eyes to inner sight. Or perhaps certain food preparations for dream incubation were rich in sesame oil, meant to cleanse internally as well as externally. The oil might be seen as coating the pathways to the subconscious, ensuring messages flow smoothly without distortion. Think of it like a cosmic lubricant for your neural pathways. An interesting open scholarly debate still swirls around the precise mechanism through which ancient cultures believed oils affected spiritual or dream states. Historians still argue whether the perceived benefits were entirely symbolic, ritualistic, and psychosomatic. or if they held a subtle, unarticulated awareness of the physical properties of certain oils. Could the fatty acids in sesame oil, for example, contribute to nerve health or a calmer digestive system, thus indirectly improving sleep quality? Or was it the tactile sensation, the scent, and the powerful cultural belief in oil's purificatory power that created the desired effect? Most likely, it was the ritualistic importance and deeply held belief that were paramount with any physiological effects, simply bolstering the subjective experience of enhanced clarity. It's hard to objectively measure a purified soul with scientific instruments. Ultimately, while you won't find a recipe for dream-enhancing sesame oil pie, the pervasive role of oil in purification and consecration made it an indirect but powerful player in the quest for ideal dream food. It didn't fill you up like barley, or provide sweet dreams like honey in terms of direct consumption for prophetic vision. Rather, it cleansed the inner and outer self, preparing the divine conduit that was your body and mind. You hoped that by being literally anointed by purity, your spiritual receptors would be as sharp as could be, allowing only the clearest and most direct divine broadcasts to stream into your slumber. Just remember to use a modest amount, otherwise you risk simply sliding right out of your sleep, no matter how profound the message was. We've discussed substances that calm, sweeten, and cleanse. Now let's consider a foundational, pure, and symbolically potent liquid milk. While not perhaps the first thing you'd think of as a dream food in a mystical sense, milk in ancient Babylon held profound significance linked to purity, new life, and divine blessings. It wasn't merely a nutritional beverage. It was an offering, a symbol of beginnings, and its gentle, nurturing nature was implicitly linked to fostering unblemished, insightful, and clear dreams. Dairying was an important part of Mesopotamian agriculture. Milk from cows, goats, and sheep provided essential nutrients and was consumed as a beverage as well as being processed into yogurt, cheese, and butter. This reliance on milk products makes it a mainstream historical fact that dairy played a significant role in their diet. Think of morning routines in Babylonian homes, perhaps a bowl of barley porridge with fresh milk, a gentle start to the day. Or during cooler seasons, a warm drink, both sustaining and comforting. Symbolically, milk was intrinsically linked to purity, new beginnings, and maternal nourishment. It represented the unblemished essence of life, untouched by the impurities of the world. In ritual contexts, milk was a highly revered offering, often poured out as libations to deities to symbolize purity and solicit blessings. It was a humble yet powerful offering signifying life, fertility, and renewal. You would offer pure, fresh milk not just to quench the thirst of the gods, but to symbolize your pure intent and humble reverence. How does this link to dreams? The purity associated with milk translated into the spiritual realm. Just as milk was considered pure and life-giving, consuming it, or offering it for consumption, could be seen as an act that promoted spiritual purity within the dreamer. If you aim to receive unadulterated, unblemished messages from the gods in your dreams, what better way to prepare your internal environment than by consuming or invoking something that embodies purity itself? It's like ensuring your dream receiver is made of the purest possible components. You're washing your internal spiritual channels with pure intention. Our quirky tidbit for this section. In some Babylonian rituals, fresh milk, particularly from a prime ewe or goat, might be used in purification rites for sick individuals or those seeking spiritual guidance. This included both bathing with milk and potentially ceremonial drinking. The belief was that the milk would literally cleanse away impurities or malevolent influences, including those that might send nightmares or cloudy visions. Imagine a priest administering a milk bath not just for hygiene but for profound spiritual detoxification before bed. It sounds somewhat comforting in a rustic pre-jacuzzi sort of way. You would almost float off to sleep in pure, dreamy peace. The calming effect of milk, even without a conscious understanding of its chemical composition, might have also been recognized intuitively. For young children, milk is associated with comfort and sleep. For adults, a warm drink can soothe. This gentle quality aligns with the idea of fostering peaceful slumber, which in turn leads to clearer and more pleasant dreams. A body at ease is a mind open to meaningful whispers. This leads us to another fascinating open scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether the perceived effect of milk on dreams and spiritual purity was solely due to its potent symbolism as a pure offering and life giver, or if the Babylonians intuitively observed any subtle physiological effects. Did they, without our modern understanding of amino acids or circadian rhythms, grasp that a naturally simple and soothing food might contribute to deeper, more restorative sleep, and therefore clearer dream recall? Or was its consumption, especially in ritual, a purely performative act designed to elicit the desired spiritual state through cultural belief alone. It's hard to delineate the precise boundaries between practical observation, deep symbolism, and placebo effect when dealing with belief systems of this ancient profundity. Ultimately, milk wasn't a magic potion for visions, but rather a profound facilitator for spiritual cleanliness and receptivity. By engaging with milk, drinking it, offering it, or using it in cleansing rituals, the Babylonians aimed to purify their inner selves, believing that such a purified state would attract benevolent divine attention and foster clear, pure, and insightful dreams. So if you were a Baru priest contemplating a momentous message for the king, you might well advise a meal steeped in humble but spiritually significant milk, a testament to pure intention before a night of sacred sleep. Just don't let it curdle. You definitely don't want to dream about curdled milk. That's probably an omen you don't want to interpret even in ancient Babylon. So far, we've explored what you, the humble Babylonian, might eat or drink to prepare your own body and mind for clearer dreams. But what about when the message needed to be really truly impactful? Or when you were dealing with cosmic entities whose desires probably transcended earthly bread and butter? That's where the idea of dream food takes an outward turn, offering elaborate feasts for the gods themselves. This wasn't about preparing yourself for a dream, but preparing a sumptuous meal for the divine, believing that these grand communal acts of feasting would invite the deities to speak directly to the dreamers through profound and unambiguous messages. The practice of offering food to deities was a cornerstone of ancient Babylonian religion, underpinning every temple and every ritual calendar. This is a mainstream historical fact. Daily, weekly, and yearly offerings of foodstuffs, drinks, and precious goods were meticulously prepared and presented to the cult statues of the gods in the temples. These offerings were seen as literally feeding the gods, sustaining them, and ensuring their benevolent attention. Think of the gods not as ethereal, untouchable beings, but as powerful cosmic rulers who appreciated a good meal and comfortable surroundings. Just like you expect a little hospitality when visiting important people, the Babylonians believed the gods expected and deserved the utmost culinary respect. You can almost imagine the celestial Yelp reviews for the temples based on the quality of their offerings, 4 stars. Marduk especially liked the spiced mutton, though he wished there was more barley beer, still solid divine service. When these offerings were made, especially the elaborate ceremonial feasts, they weren't just generic acts of piety. They were deliberate invocations, an effort to create a profound bond with the divine. And this bond, they believed, was a two-way street. By literally feeding the gods, you invited them to feed you with their wisdom, their favor, and critically their messages transmitted during sleep. These feasts were therefore a direct pipeline for encouraging dreams, not just any dreams, but potent, authoritative, and unambiguous communications. Imagine a scene: priests meticulously preparing a grand table within the temple precincts, laden with succulent cuts of meat, freshly baked breads, fragrant dates, sweet honey cakes, and copious amounts of fine beer and date wine. The air thick with incense and the scent of roasted meat, a feast designed for beings of immense power and refined taste. Then, after the gods, or rather their cult statues, had symbolically partaken, the offerings were often consumed by the priest's royalty, or designated worshippers, in a communal feast. This was sacred consumption, a profound sharing of a meal with the divine, embodying the communion between humanity and the heavens. Here's a quirky tidbit: the Babylonians even developed sophisticated systems for distributing the portions of the gods' meals. There were exact guidelines specifying which priests got which cuts of meat, or how much of the divine beer they were entitled to. The logic was that since the food had been touched by the gods, even if symbolically, it now carried a measure of divine essence or blessing. So eating the leftovers from the gods' banquet was a very potent act of ritual participation. And presumably for those hoping for divine messages in dreams, this communal sanctified consumption could powerfully enhance the likelihood of receiving clear visions. You're not just eating, you're literally metabolizing divine intent. So if a king was faced with a looming invasion or a critical decision, he might not just go for personal dietary adjustments. He would command an elaborate feast for the protective deities, praying for their guidance, fully expecting that a night following such a lavish display would bring forth a decisive dream from a grateful god. It's a pragmatic exchange, good food for good information. After all that effort, the gods really ought to cough up something useful. An open scholarly debate often arises here. Historians still argue whether these elaborate communal feasts and their subsequent divine dreams served primarily as a means of legitimizing political and religious authority. The king receives a divine message, Therefore his rule is blessed, or if the communal spiritual fervor created by such a feast genuinely primed individuals for subjectively powerful and religiously significant dreams. Was it psychological manipulation on a grand scale, or truly perceived divine communion, or perhaps both at once, the societal benefit of a unifying belief system where sacred meals cemented social hierarchy cannot be overlooked? But for the individual dreamer, the profound subjective experience was likely real. Ultimately, these feasts for the gods redefined dream food, not as something you eat to prepare your subconscious, but as something you give to prepare the divine mind for speaking to yours. It was an act of grand cosmic hospitality, betting that if you offered the most exquisite meal, the gods would reciprocate with the clearest, most valuable dream insights. You're not trying to send a text. You're catering a divine banquet to secure a face-to-face or dream-to-mind consultation with the cosmic powers that be. A very expensive and labor-intensive strategy, but for the future of your city-state, well worth every roasted lamb chop. You've indulged in the grand feasts offered to the gods, hoping for reciprocal divine wisdom in dreams. But what about the opposite approach? Sometimes, to truly tune into the ethereal whispers of the divine, the Babylonians believed you had to quiet the noise of the physical world. This leads us to a seemingly paradoxical concept for dream food: deliberate fasting, or the systematic absence of food, used as a powerful tool to enhance spiritual receptivity and open the mind to profound dream insights. In many ancient cultures across the globe, fasting was and remains a core component of spiritual practice. It's not about losing weight or achieving a specific physique. For the Babylonians, just like their contemporaries, abstaining from food was seen as a way to purify the body, focus the mind, and subdue earthly desires, thereby making one more sensitive to spiritual influences. This is a mainstream historical fact. Fasting periods, often before important rituals, religious festivals, or in times of distress to appease the gods, were common. Think of it as hitting the reset button on your physical self, clearing out the mundane so the spiritual can truly shine. You were purposefully weakening the demands of your corporeal form to amplify the subtle signals of your spirit. Why would a deliberate lack of food be considered beneficial for dreams? The underlying philosophy was simple. By removing the distractions of digestion and the physical demands of hunger, the mind could ascend to a higher plane of awareness. A body engaged in active digestion, particularly of rich or heavy foods, could be seen as noisy, physically taxing, and grounding. A hungry, purified body, however, would be lighter, less encumbered, potentially creating a clearer pathway for subconscious and divine communication. It's like turning off all the lights and extraneous sounds in your room when you're trying to concentrate on something really important. The emptiness facilitates greater clarity. You literally emptied your internal vessel so the gods could fill it with whatever they wished. Hopefully revelations and not more hunger pangs. The purpose of such a fast in the context of dream incubation was usually to sharpen the prophetic acuity of the dreamer. When preparing for significant temple sleep, or when a Baru priest advised a specific regimen for a king seeking a crucial omen, dietary restriction would almost certainly have been a component. It was a rigorous form of spiritual preparation aimed at removing anything that might muddy the waters of perception or distract the soul from its direct engagement with divine sources. You aren't just hungry, you are hungry for enlightenment. Now for a quirky tidbit: while fasting was broadly practiced, sometimes specific types of food were to be avoided, even when a full fast wasn't mandated. Certain unclean foods, perhaps associated with chaos, certain wild animals or foreign lands, were often prohibited. Similarly, very rich or highly seasoned foods might be avoided because they were thought to overstimulate the body or mind. This isn't just about general health. It's about avoiding spiritual indigestion that might lead to turbulent or unintelligible dreams. Imagine trying to make sense of a divine prophecy while simultaneously experiencing internal heartburn. Not ideal for accurate deciphering. So for a Baru priest, advising no heavily spiced goat stew before your spiritual quest was as much about dream clarity as about physical comfort. This practice, while rigorous, implies a deep understanding that physical state significantly impacts mental and spiritual clarity. When the body is clean and disciplined, the mind becomes more alert, and perception, including nocturnal perception, is heightened. The lack of energy from food also sometimes produces a state of lightheadedness or altered consciousness, which some ancient cultures certainly viewed as opening to the spiritual realm. Whether that state actually makes dreams more prophetic is certainly up for debate, but it can undoubtedly make them more vivid and memorable. This brings us to a significant open scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether the perceived dream-enhancing effects of fasting were entirely due to psychological and ritualistic factors, for example, heightened expectation and sensory deprivation leading to more vivid subjective experiences, or if the physiological effects of temporary food deprivation like shifts in brain chemistry, or even slight ketosis genuinely induced a more lucid or accessible dream state. Did the brain, starved of its usual inputs, generate its own more profound imagery? Or was it simply that with fewer distractions, the spiritual desire became more potent, making the dream messages feel more profound and intentional? Perhaps it was a combination of extreme intent meeting a subtle biochemical shift that cultivated unique nocturnal experiences. So while we've mostly focused on dream food, as something to consume, the Babylonian understanding extended to the profound power of its absence. Fasting was a disciplined pathway to profound insight, a conscious stripping away of the mundane to prepare for the sacred. It's like turning your interior world into a silent, echoey chamber where even the faintest whisper from the cosmos can be heard. Just try to resist the urge for a midnight snack after your spiritual cleanse. Your ancient Babylonian counterpart would have told you that every rumble of your stomach was a potential spiritual static disrupting your celestial reception. So much for comfort food. You've wrestled with the profound silence of fasting as a spiritual practice for clearer dreams. Now let's tie that idea of purity and spiritual readiness to a broader category of preparation. Comprehensive cleansing and dietary restrictions undertaken before major rituals, especially those aimed at securing powerful nocturnal visions. It wasn't enough just to decide to have a profound dream. You often had to align your entire body and spirit to receive it, turning your daily life into a continuous preparation for that sacred slumber. In ancient Babylonian religious life, meticulous purification rituals were a prerequisite for approaching the divine. You wouldn't just waltz into a sacred space, whether a temple or a hallowed dream chamber, without thorough preparation. This deep-seated belief in purification, both external bathing clean clothes and internal dietary mental state, is a mainstream historical fact central to Mesopotamian religious practice. The idea was to eliminate ritual impurity, negative influences, and everyday grime that might offend the deities or obscure divine messages. It's like ensuring you don't track mud into a highly sensitive, very expensive scientific lab. You want to keep the environment as pristine as possible for optimal data reception. Within these purification processes, specific dietary restrictions were frequently imposed. This went beyond general fasting. It involved abstaining from certain foods that were deemed impure, ritually polluting, or simply too stimulating to the senses, which could disrupt the serene state desired for sacred sleep. This might include anything from raw meats, fermented items, or anything that carried symbolic associations with death or chaos. Imagine preparing for your spiritual supersleep and having to navigate a long list of forbidden foods that went beyond your basic moral precepts. No funny business in the kitchen tonight, buddy, if you want good dreams. The purpose was twofold: practical and symbolic. Practically, eating a simple, easily digestible diet reduces the physiological distractions of a churning stomach, bloating, or excessive energy. Symbolically, abstaining from impure foods marked one as dedicated, self-disciplined, and respectful of the spiritual purity required for direct communication with the divine. It's a deliberate act of consecration, making your body a purified chalice ready to receive divine wine, or in this case, divine whispers. Our quirky tidbit for this section focuses on a particularly intense dietary restriction for certain rituals, the avoidance of anything associated with worldly pleasure or common indulgences. For a high-stakes dream incubation, a person might be required to abstain from things like garlic and onions, not because they were bad, but perhaps because their pungent taste was too strong, too earthly, and could distract from the subtle, nuanced sensations of the spiritual realm. Imagine giving up garlic of all things in a cuisine where it was practically ubiquitous. This would be a real act of dietary penance. It highlights how serious they were about maintaining a perfectly unclouded internal environment. No garlic tonight, for I must receive the word of Marduk regarding the next barley harvest. Its pungent essence might confuse my divine satellite signal. The specific dietary protocols were not one-size-fits-all. The Baru priests would meticulously tailor them based on the individual's spiritual goal, the deity being invoked, and the specific ritual context. This meticulous customization highlights the precision and systematic nature of their dream divination practices. They weren't throwing darts at a dietary board. They were applying deeply understood to them anyway principles of spiritual pharmacology. It's the difference between telling someone to eat healthy and a nutritionist giving you a bespoke month-long meal plan. Only here the goal is prophecy, not six-pack abs. This continuous dedication to dietary purity also reflects the Babylonian worldview where cosmic order and human purity were seen as intrinsically linked. Any disruption in one could cause ripple effects in the other. If you ate a forbidden food before attempting to receive a divine message, you weren't just experiencing minor indigestion. You might be risking cosmic offense and completely garbling the divine broadcast, or even attracting malevolent dream spirits. It added a weighty spiritual responsibility to every bite. An important open scholarly debate still rages. Historians still argue whether the comprehensive cleansing, particularly dietary restrictions, truly yielded specific dream content or clarity, or if it was the intense psychological effect of the ritual process, the profound sense of preparation and dedication that made the dreams feel more vivid and prophetic to the individual. Was it the food or the fervent belief and the heightened state of awareness engendered by such discipline? Did the psychological expectation of a significant dream brought on by such stringent adherence to dietary and ritual purification simply ensure that any dream experienced would be interpreted with immense seriousness and perceived profundity? It's the ancient world's greatest experiment in cognitive bias, possibly. So when aiming for those profound, life-altering dream visions, it was a journey of internal refinement as much as a waiting game. These stringent dietary regulations, combined with other cleansing practices, were a vital step in making the physical body a pure, quiet vessel perfectly attuned to receive messages from the cosmos. You weren't just saying a prayer before bed. You were cleaning your entire spiritual house, stocking only the approved metaphysical snacks, ensuring the divine signal would come through crystal clear. No unexpected junk food indigestion disturbing those precious prophecies for these diligent dreamers. Nope, none at all. You've prepared your body and mind through a blend of carefully selected dream foods and purifying dietary restrictions. Now you stand on the threshold of the ultimate ancient Babylonian quest for dream wisdom temple sleep. This wasn't just a quiet night at the local inn. It was a highly formalized and deeply sacred practice, an act of conscious incubation, where the very environment of the temple, often combined with specific diets and rituals, aimed to bring forth the clearest and most vital dream revelations. You're not just hoping for a divine message. You're literally booking a divine direct message experience and hoping your Instagram post goes viral. Temple sleep or dream incubation was a prevalent and highly esteemed practice throughout the ancient Near East, and especially so in Mesopotamia. It's a mainstream historical fact that individuals seeking cures for illness, guidance on major decisions, or prophetic insights would journey to sacred sites and sleep within the temple precincts, expecting to receive answers in their dreams from the resident deity. This wasn't something everyone did every night. It was usually reserved for serious concerns. Perhaps a king needing a clear omen before a war, a person afflicted by an intractable illness seeking divine remedy, or a desperate parent praying for guidance about a sick child. The air within the temple was thick with intent and the accumulated spiritual energy of countless past supplicants. The temple environment itself was meticulously designed to foster a state of receptivity. These weren't necessarily luxurious accommodations, though comfort might have been considered to encourage proper rest. More importantly, they were consecrated spaces ritually cleaned, infused with incense, and considered dwelling places for the gods. Sleeping within these hallowed walls was believed to bring one physically closer to the divine presence, thus enhancing the likelihood of direct communication through dreams. You're not just sleeping near a holy relic. You're bedding down in the spiritual mainframe, directly plugging into the divine network. When undergoing temple sleep, the previously discussed dietary preparations, especially the periods of ritual cleansing or fasting, would culminate. A supplicant wouldn't enter the sacred slumber after a massive distracting meal. Instead, they would be on a carefully regulated, purified diet, perhaps specific ritual loaves, or just pure water, depending on the intensity of the required spiritual connection. This clean, empty vessel presented to the deity was deemed most fitting for the reception of pristine visions. The food served here wasn't about sustenance so much as facilitating spiritual transparency. Here's a quirky tidbit related to this. In some cases, the deity would be invoked with specific dream food offerings, placed near the sleeper, almost as an additional enticement. These offerings might not be consumed by the human, but they served as a further appeal to the god or goddess for clear dream communication. Imagine carefully placing a fresh fig and a small bowl of milk beside your temporary resting mat, hoping the patron deity would be so pleased with the midnight snack you'd provided, they'd grace your mind with the answer to your most pressing questions. It's the spiritual equivalent of putting a mint on your pillow at a divine hotel. The role of the Baru priest again was indispensable. Not only would they prescribe the preparatory rituals and dietary protocols, but after the dream incubation, they would be the primary interpreters of the ensuing dream. Sometimes the dream was terrifyingly literal, sometimes incredibly cryptic. A Baru might need to interview the dreamer in great detail, comparing the received imagery with vast omen texts and astrological data, essentially trying to get all the data points from this deeply spiritual transaction. Without the Baru's skilled analysis, a divine download might just remain incomprehensible data, no clearer than trying to read a computer's raw code without knowing the programming language. An ongoing open scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether the efficacy of temple sleep and the associated dietary preparations was due to the actual divine intervention it sought, or whether it was a powerful, psycho-spiritual phenomenon where sensory deprivation heightened expectation. The symbolism of the sacred space and possibly even physiological changes from the specialized diet conspired to create profound, memorable, and culturally meaningful subjective experiences that were then interpreted as divine. Was it literally God whispering, or a finely tuned psychological trigger in a sacred environment? It's hard to draw definitive conclusions, but the deeply held belief undoubtedly made the experience potent for the individual seeking insight. So, to step into a Babylonian temple seeking dream guidance was to engage in a profound and comprehensive process where dream food, whether consumed, abstained from, or offered, played a nuanced but pivotal role. It was a conscious dedication to prepare not just your body for slumber, but your very soul for communication with the cosmic powers. You would emerge hopefully with clearer visions, feeling as if you'd truly conversed with the divine, or at least had a really impressive mental movie directed by unseen forces. Just remember to pack lightly. Your purification rituals might frown upon extra luggage, especially that sneaky chocolate bar you were hiding. We've traveled from barley fields to sacred slumber, witnessing how Babylonians wove food and ritual into their quest for dream wisdom. Now let's explore a fascinating intersection: how elements of food, either consumed, prepared, or symbolized, crossed over into the realm of amulets and magical charms. Because sometimes just hoping for a good dream wasn't enough. You wanted to actively compel a certain kind of dream or powerfully protect your slumber using tangible objects imbued with specific, often culinary properties. This wasn't about a passive reception of messages. It was about proactive, hands-on dream management involving ingredients that felt right in your stomach and around your neck. The use of amulets and charms for protection and prosperity was incredibly widespread in ancient Mesopotamia. This is a mainstream historical fact, with archaeological excavations continually unearthing small portable objects carved with symbols, figures, or inscriptions designed to ward off evil, attract good fortune, or provide specific benefits. Think of them as tiny, personalized insurance policies against a very active and sometimes hostile spiritual world. You wouldn't leave home without one, especially if you suspected your neighbor might have a grumbly demon familiar following them. In the context of dreams, amulets were particularly important. Given the belief that malevolent spirits could send nightmares or obscure prophetic visions, protective charms for sleep were essential. And guess what often figured into the materials or designs of these charms? You guessed it, food-related elements. It wasn't about eating the amulet, of course, but about leveraging the powerful symbolism and perceived magical essence of certain foods in a portable, protective form. Consider barley again. While eaten as a staple, tiny grains of consecrated barley or miniature representations of a bountiful barley ear might be woven into a sleep amulet. Our quirky tidbit for this section. A common practice for deterring nightmares involved placing specific objects under the pillow or beside the bed, and these often included dried fruits like dates or figs, or small bundles of aromatic herbs such as frankincense or myrrh. The idea was that these natural, pure, or fragrant substances possessed an inherent protective quality, acting as a spiritual shield against restless nights and ill-omened dreams. The natural sweetness and preserving properties of dates, for example, were thought to keep evil entities away, while the strong aromas of herbs literally cleared the air of malevolent presences. It's like aromatherapy with supernatural security implications. Who knew your bedside snack could double as a demonic deterrent? You almost imagine a nervous Babylonian child tucking a dried date under their pillow, hoping for sweet dreams instead of encounters with angry Lamassu. These culinary charms weren't just about warding off the bad. They could also be intended to attract specific kinds of dreams. An amulet might depict a luscious date palm or a flowing fish, directly appealing to the benevolent forces associated with abundance and wisdom and symbolically inviting them into the dreamscape. You wanted to make sure your dreams were serving up clarity, not chaos. And these amulets were your personal dream coaching device, ensuring the right vibrations. It was a tangible, hands-on way to extend the benefits of dream food beyond just your stomach. And this naturally brings up a challenging academic question. Historians still argue whether the perceived effectiveness of these food-related amulets was solely a psychological and placebo effect, the belief in the amulet's power granting peace of mind, and thereby improving sleep quality and dream interpretation. Or if there was a deeper culturally encoded meaning that somehow translated into a tangible shift in a dreamer's subjective experience. Did simply seeing or touching a depiction of a barley stalk genuinely bring feelings of prosperity that extended into dream themes? Or did the physical properties like scent of certain food items play a subtle role in creating a calming environment? The powerful nexus between ritual belief symbolic objects and their psychosomatic effects is difficult for us to fully disentangle from our modern rationalist perspective. So while not consumed, these charms directly represent the Babylonians' profound integration of food into their spiritual architecture, specifically their relationship with the dream world. From the simplest dried date to intricate miniature representations of crops, these amulets and charms underscore the omnipresent belief that the material world, especially its sustaining and sacred elements, could directly influence the unseen nocturnal realms of the mind and spirit. You wanted to curate your dream experience, and sometimes the best way to do that was to put a symbolic version of your dream meal right beside your bed. It adds a certain mystique to your kitchen pantry, doesn't it? Now you'll probably look at your spice rack and wonder what powerful amulets you could be forging with that leftover cinnamon and cardamom. Best to just enjoy your peaceful slumber now. You've traversed the vast spiritual and culinary landscape of ancient Babylon, a journey that has unveiled what truly constituted the best dream food for this ancient civilization. From the humble, life-sustaining barley that laid the groundwork for bodily calm and clear-headedness to the sweet prophecy of dates, the deep wisdom associated with river fish, and the duality of pomegranates that unveiled both life and hidden truths. You've tasted the calming influence of specialized herbs, the divine sweetness of honey, the spiritual dedication of ritual loaves, and even perhaps the relaxing effect of beer when sipped with intention. You've been anointed with purifying oils, contemplated milk's unblemished purity, imagined feasts laid for gods, and considered the stark clarity offered by fasting. And finally, you've discovered how these edible elements, whether eaten or simply held as symbolic charms, reinforced and protected the precious nightly journey into the dream world. What emerges is not a single magic ingredient, not one particular ancient Babylonian superfood for dreams, but a profound, sophisticated, and utterly holistic understanding of the self and its place in the cosmos. For the Babylonians, your body was not merely a sack of organs. It was a highly sensitive antenna, a vessel for divine communication, and its maintenance, culinary, spiritual, and physical, was paramount to receiving intelligible messages from the other side. This was a consistent, systematic approach that bound every facet of their daily existence, including every morsel they consumed, to their most sacred nocturnal experiences. This overarching holistic belief is our final mainstream historical fact, underpinning virtually every aspect of their religious and medical practices. The quest for the best dream food was really a quest for optimal alignment. They understood, perhaps intuitively, or through centuries of careful observation, that an agitated body, an undisciplined mind, or a spirit unpurified by ritual and intention, would simply generate noisy, chaotic dreams, mere echoes of daily life's dramas, rather than profound whispers from the gods. So they meticulously curated their diet, engaged in specific preparations, and approached the act of eating with a sacred mindfulness that's utterly alien to our grab-and-go convenience culture. They didn't have protein shakes and instant ramen, but they arguably had something far more spiritually fulfilling when they consciously connected their physical sustenance to their highest aspirations for divine insight. And for our final quirky tidbit of this entire saga, consider the subtle distinction between dreaming and being visited in a dream. For the Babylonians, it wasn't just about having a dream, but specifically experiencing a visitation, a precise communication from a deity ancestor, or even a particular demon that offered critical insight. The entire purpose of dream food dietary restrictions, temple sleep, and amulets was to prepare the human receiver for these highly targeted transmissions. It implies an intentionality, both human and divine, that makes your occasional post-pizza nightmares seem delightfully insignificant by comparison. You don't want to inadvertently receive a visit from the spirit of that undercooked lamb stew from earlier. That's a different kind of haunted. This all wraps back around to the grand open scholarly debate that has lingered through so many sections. Historians still argue about the precise extent to which ancient Babylonians differentiated between the pharmacological, or as they understood it, physical effects of certain foods and their potent symbolic and ritualistic significance in inducing clearer, more profound dreams. Was a quiet stomach the means, or was the purification ritual the means? Did the effect come from the inherent property of the food itself, or from the profound unifying belief system that made the consumption meaningful and therefore powerful? Perhaps it was an intricate dance between them, with intention, substance, and collective belief creating a potent subjective reality where the best food was indeed the one that led you directly to the divine blueprint. So as you gently drift off to sleep tonight, perhaps consider your own diet, your daily routines, and how they subtly shape the landscape of your subconscious. The Babylonians certainly thought about it, seeing their entire life as a preparation for that nightly plunge into the unknown. Their best dream food wasn't found on a secret menu or in a hidden vault. It was cultivated from the very soil beneath their feet, prepared with sacred intent, and consumed with profound reverence, all in the enduring human quest to find meaning and guidance in the enigmatic whispers of the dreaming mind. You can almost feel the ancient dust settling, the quiet hum of a distant temple, the soft scent of incense and sacred bread permeating the Mesopotamian night air, inviting visions for a purposeful future. Now, as the stories of barley dates and moonlit temple offerings begin to fade from your mind, feel the quiet rhythm of your own breath slowing, deepening. Let the ancient dust of Babylon settle softly around you, not as a weight, but as a calming blanket woven from history and forgotten beliefs. The anxieties of the day, the little worries, they can simply dissipate like wisps of smoke in the evening breeze. Imagine those ancient dreams, profound and rich with meaning, now merging with your own restful thoughts. There's no need to seek powerful omens tonight, no complex riddles to decipher, just the gentle descent into peaceful slumber. Let your own mind create whatever narratives it wishes, free from ancient demands. You're safe here, bathed in the soft quiet. Feel the quiet hush of your space, the calming rhythm of the night. Every historical journey eventually leads back home, back to your own peaceful stillness. And now the stories pause, allowing you to simply be.